Hello, I'm Tessa Miller, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make low poly objects for video games using Blender. And kind of a method that seems a little bit unorthodox for Blender ways of doing things, but seems to work pretty nice. So I'm going to show you how to make a simple objects, for example like this knife here. This was, actually I made a YouTube or a video for this before, and the computer locked up, so I'm using a different computer now. But this is what I wanted to show you how to make. But I'm going to be doing today a small, like a hard shell case for a medikit, or anything you would want to put a hard shell case in a game for you know, finding weapons or finding medical aid or equipment, things like that. So I'm going to be doing a hard shell case. One of the difference with a kind of a low poly game object, for example, this is an art object. This is mainly very, very overly detailed, but it is meant to be overly detailed. But what you can use an art object for is making a low poly object. For example, this sucker is like 20,000 vertices. It is just overly packed and overly detailed, and when you render it out, it looks fabulous. However, you can't use this in a game because it's like a memory paperweight. But you can do this, which is make a texture out of a high poly model, bring it in, and use that texture. For example, this is a texture I made directly from the model you just saw, and it's meant to be make these out to be really, really, really just packed with detail, that you can get so up close to them that you can see like nicks and things like that. And I'll be showing how to make this, putting displacement into your materials to make them look more real. But so to make a game-worthy object, let's see here, and then make a new object out of the high poly object. In our case, we're just going to be taking we're going to be going directly to a low poly object, but I'm going to show you how to make a low poly object look a little bit more realistic. So first off, I'm going to open up Blender. Just going to open up a new file. This is what Blender looks like when you first start off. It's camera, a lamp, and a box. Mine looks a little bit different, just mostly because I'm using a theme. But a couple things just to start you off. First, if you are using to do this model building, one, you'll need a 3-button mouse, and also if you're using a desktop or a laptop, the number pad and the keys on the top do different things. I'll explain quickly here. The number pad on the side, actually I'm going to change the object here because it's with a box example. So here's this little tank that I built, and this is just kind of a simple game object that I was throwing together. And I'll show how to do textures and things like this. But if you're using the number pad, you press 1, it goes to a direct center with our tank. Press 3, you can go to the side. Press Control 3, it'll go to the other side. 7 goes to the top view. Control 7 brings us to the bottom. And let's see, Control 1 brings you to the back. So 1, 3, 7, and 9 are all kind of like primary jump views, and then Control will do any of the, actually I 9 is an opposite view. So if you're holding down, if you have 1 and then you press 9, you'll automatically jump to the other side. So 9 pretty much does about the same thing that Control will do, but 1, 3, and 7 are the kind of like the primary things that you mostly end up using. It's just you can use Control to go to the other side. So 7 would be a top, Control bring it to the bottom. 2, 4, 6, and 8 do controls of the about 15% change in view. I honestly never ever really use these. I mostly just use holding down the third button on the mouse, which will operate the camera rotating. Let's see, so 5 is changes from your perspective view to orthographic. So orthographic is more like a blueprint. 5 will bring you into an orthographic view. So like if we were standing right next to the tank and the tank was huge, you know, this is what it would look like. But if you press 5, you'll go directly into a blueprint view, and everything will be unbiased of where the edges line up and such. So that way, this is very good for if you want to make sure how big your object is, make sure your edges on it. Where 5, the edges are going to be biased to a perspective in the background, and that way if you're trying to build to a perspective and you can't really tell exactly where the perspective is, your object will end up kind of looking distorted. So let's see here, and then the next is what do the keys across the top do for say a laptop versus a desktop. The desktop will almost always have a 10 key or a number pad on the right side. A laptop, some do, some don't. A lot of, like my older laptop had them, but my newer one doesn't come with them. So the 1 through 0 across the top is in control of layers. So for example, if I press 2, the bullet that is in this tank that gets added to the scene is on layer 2, and then layer 1 we can come back to the tank. If I actually press Alt-H, because I have a lot of hidden objects for this scene, we'll have like all of these objects. So if I wanted to, for example, we could go M3, move the monkey head to M4, move this to M5, and this to like M6, then you could actually just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're seeing all the objects in different layers, and this will just quickly jump you to the layers. If you press the little squiggle key on the very end, it brings all the objects in at the same time, including the bullet, which is lit up. This is kind of a bad, a blah-looking scene, but I just made it up to test parts of the tank. So anyway, let's see here. What else? Oh, and then also if you're using a laptop, set your enumeration under settings to enumerate number pad. And what this does, and let's see, do I have it still open? No. I'll just go back to that real quick. Under input, that is right there, so that you can, that makes it so that 1 through 0 will operate the quick change views, but your layers can actually just be done by selecting on the layers panel below here. So there really isn't much of a need to use those numbers for much else. So anyway, that's basically the keys. So gonna get started. I'm gonna open a new scene. So I want to make a hard shell case box for carrying equipment or such that you'll find. So let's see, we have this little cube that you always start with. I'm going to press, let me see, for scaling an object using the keys, I'm going to just press S and X, and this can scale it down a little bit. I'm going to scale the Z axis. In this tutorial, I'm not actually going to bring in an image, like a blueprint image, to work with. I'm just going to make it on the fly. I'm going to press 5 to go into orthographic. Then I'm going to press Tab, and that goes into edit mode. And I'm going to press the keys on the keyboard just to bring this object up a bit. And the reason I did that is just so that when you add it into the scene and you drop it anywhere on the ground, it's going to land on that little spot there. In the game, you probably wouldn't want to use that. You might actually want to use like a constraint box around it that would tell where the weight of this would be, but in setting it down, I just like to use that. So let's say we want to add kind of a crease around this to open the box. So right now, I just press Tab. Will take you into edit mode. I'm going to press Control R to put a line around the box, and I want to have the lid be about there. I'm going to press Control B, and this is, I think it's called bisect or bevel. I'm not sure, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it will take any line and it will make a crease. So now I want to go and select all the faces around this. So for that, I'm going to press Shift Alt, and Shift and Alt right now, since if you're depending on, for example, I'm in face selection. Blender has several different ways here where if I press this, we can select vertices by themselves. If you're selecting this, you're on edge selection. If you're on faces, then you're on face selection. And say if I want to grab all the faces around the box, I can go and wherever you're closest to. So if I'm closest to right here and I press Shift, Alt, and click, it'll click all the faces all the way around it. And the reason it'll do that is this is still, the box is in quads, meaning each one is a square. If it is in I think trisses or triangles, I'm not sure, I think they're just called tris, but when they're in, if you have a computer make out something in an object, it is most always in tris, whereas quads is more of how you would build it like as a human. So that's just kind of how the computer will make things out for you, is in these triangles. When it's in a triangle, it's really hard to edit, so everything you do mostly in quads. So I'm going to select all of those, press E to extrude, and E to extrude will actually just pull anything in there out. So what I'm doing is just letting go of them after I pressed E to extrude, and then I'm actually going to scale those in. Now when I scale those, let me see if you can tell. If I go directly into a side view and I scale those in, as you can see, they are all pulling in to each other. So I'm going to scale this out. I'm actually going to back up till before I started scaling. The reason it'll do that is because they are actually all moving on a what is it called? The scaling is all set up for the the pivot of this, the pivot is set up on a medium point. So everything will go in on itself. If you were to touch right here and you press scale, it all scales down to the middle of wherever that is. If I grab all of these at the same time and then go to individual origin, I don't think it will do that. So if I go to the side and you scale, it's still doing that. Shucks. Wrong type of example. But right now that's good enough for me. I want this kind of a hard shell case that looks like it's heavy duty. So I'm going to go back to medium point and let's see here. So I want to make this box also not, I don't want to make it look very boring either. So what I'm going to do is press Control R, which will do a loop cut around the object. And then I'm going to do rotate on the wheel so that it rotates out. So right now it has 4 loop cuts, and I don't need all of those loop cuts, but I'm just cutting using the loop cut tool to select how far out I want it to go. So let's see. Actually, I'm going to go back and do something. I'm going to add a loop cut here and a loop cut about down here. I'm going to select the top and the bottom faces and then scale those that, as well as, now if I were to grab this, it's going to move the top and move that inward. So if I press scale Z, it'll scale this up a bit more like that. And let's see. So I have these loops here, and I don't need this. Anytime I add things, I want to make sure I want to keep things very simple. Even though I'm trying to make it look interesting, I want to still save on vertices. So I'm going to go, now I want these to be straight. I don't want them to have this edge here. So I'm going to press 1 on the front. That's not side view. This is going to be the front, but I'm pressing through 3 to get to the side. I'm going to go to individual origins, and I'm going to press Z so that I'm in X-ray. And then let's see, scale Y. Now if I'm scaling Y on individual origins, it's going to keep them all I have to do is just scale in, and if I want to be more precise, because I can see that they're a little bit off, I can press scale Y and just use the arrow keys. And that looks perfect. And then also I'll do the same thing with these lines here. I'm going to press 1, and then let's see, scale X. This one is being tricky. Okay. So now the sides here and front and back, these lines go all the way through. And the reason I wanted to do that with them is I'm going to press Shift-Alt on the edges. And edge selecting works the same way as face selecting. Let's see here. And I'm going to try this, even though I'm not sure how that'll work. Control B, I want to biselect. Yes, that's what I want to do. Biselecting all of those edges, so that brings them all out. And that's just kind of a way why I did all of that, is that this just kind of makes it so that when I want to bring these edges out, and I didn't want to have to do math of taking each edge and moving them to where I wanted when you don't really have to. And then next I'm going to go, I want to make the lid still and the same as it is. So I'm going to deselect all of these. And then I'm going to press E to extrude. And then I'm going to scale Z. And then I'll scale, press S and X to scale the X-axis. And then likewise scale Y. And I'll scale these out. Except when I scaled them, because of the way they're coming out, you have this is distorted here, and likewise right there. So I'm going to back up. Let's see. Is that on individual origin to start with? Scale Z. Scale X. That's why. When I'm pulling these out as I'm scaling that, so actually I'm going to grab these two and scale the X-axis out. Oh, I forgot. I don't want to scale this. Actually, I just noticed another little problem as I'm doing this. When doing these, it's like I plan it out in my head how I'm going to do it before I even do any of it. This just comes in time with building stuff. The edges that are popping out, I'm going to have to fix those. And I'll explain what that is. Right now I'm in X-ray mode and I'm just going around the model, and each of the places where I want them to extrude, I'm just deselecting those faces by holding Shift down, and then selecting the face itself to deselect that face. Okay, now I have those edges. Do the same thing with these. There's a hidden face that you can't see, which I recognize it because I know what to look for, but I'll kind of explain this in a second after getting these faces deselected. Actually, I'm going to deselect everything for a moment and show you one modifier that can help out. If I go and press Control R all the way around this object, I can add that down, one loop cut, go into Z for X-ray, select vertices, press B to open up a box, and then I'm going to delete all of one side of this model. In fact, I'm going to double that. I'm also going to add a Control R, I'm going to add a line around all of this, and then I'm going to press A to deselect, B to box, and deselect all those vertices. So now I've gotten rid of half the box. What I'm going to do is make a mirror modifier that is going to mirror both the side of the box and the back of the box at the same time. So now anything I do on this is going to do the exact same thing to the rest of the box. And that way you can work smarter, not harder. And that sounds like a really doofy saying, but it's true. Why do things harder when you don't have to? I'm going to use the scale just to say how it works. That's not. Oh, that's because I'm on individual origins. I'm going to go to medium, which will scale everything out from the medium, except it's also scaling out from there. Scale Z. I'm just going to deal with, get rid of this. There we go. I'm going to scale that out. And I'm going to go in to this and just pull this out a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this, pull that out a little bit, and now you have this very hard shell case looking thing that looks very heavy duty. Looks like you can drop it out of a helicopter. Now the one thing that I was doing down here when I was selecting all these faces and deselecting these faces is because you're actually seeing, when you press up right here, you'll notice there's a face inside of there. It's because when you use extrude, it will actually extrude an object directly from there. So for example, if we add a, I'm going to deselect the object. If I go and add a isosphere, we move it over here, just for an example, scale it down a little bit. Isosphere is all triangulated, so you have all these edges. If I go and grab those 3 edges and press E, it'll extrude out from that direction, those edges. If I grab, let's see, these edges, then you press E, it'll extrude, and you get that weird shape there. If you went over, and this is just kind of for fun and really quick, simple modeling of a neat looking object, if you go under Tools, there is one which is Extrude Individual. Individual extrudes everything from that one area. So you can end up modeling really cool geometric objects using that Extrude Individual. And that's how kind of the individual origins works. Under the pivot points, if you're on individual origins and I press Scale, let's see, if we are under medium point and you press Scale, it's going to scale everything down to right there. It'll basically scale everything in on itself. And this is kind of depends on how you want to model things. But say we want to make it out, but we want to make all of these thin. If you go to individual origin, it'll scale each and every one of those objects down to little points. And also, if you wanted to, you could press like, Alt-M, merge at center. Actually, it merges all of them at center. Oh wait, I remember. If you press X and edge collapse, it'll collapse all of those in on themselves, and now you have this big spiky mess of thing. But that's the difference between individual origins and medium point. Is medium will take everything all together, individual it'll take any point selected by itself. So like if we were to do this, this, and this, and we're on medium point and you scale, it'll scale all of those in together. If we're on individual, it'll scale each one of those individual of itself. And let's see, there's a couple other options down here, like active element will make it so that, say, if I select this, 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 and this, it's going to take the last one as the active element, and everybody will go scale or move to that object. So if you go and move from right here or here, everything is technically going from right there. There's also, you can set this down here to 3D cursor, and if you scale it, it will scale directly on there. If you move it over here though, now all of a sudden it's going to scale that way. These are just different ways of manipulating the objects. So I'm going to get rid of this object here, back to the case. Right now this case, and I'm going to switch back. I usually set it to medium. I think that's Blender's default. This case actually has a face that is right here, and this is actually like a second face that wasn't supposed to be extruded, and I'm not sure if I pressed E twice on accident, but it's kind of annoying, and it's using up extra memory because that's more vertices. I'm gonna do something that may not be the best way of doing it, but it'll show how to do something else. I'm going to delete all the faces to that at the same time, and I'm going to go into Edge Select, and show a different little tool here. Right now I'm in perspective view, and the nice thing with perspective view is it lets you see kind of the top and bottom if you wish. So from the back side of this box, I can select the top and the bottom faces here and just press F, and F will fill that space. Control Z will back up anything you did, but it only does to a certain extent, so always make sure you save, which is something I should do right now. I'm going to go and save this as hard shell case. I'm not worried about the inside of the case for right now. Let's see here. I'm gonna press F to fill that. Okay, now since we have the mirror on, it's just filled all the edges of that box. This has also had an extrusion, which doesn't need to be there, because what you want to make sure is that you don't have any extra faces that aren't there, that you don't need. I'm going to press 5 to go back into orthographic. Let's see, I'm going to collapse that edge and just see if that works. Collapse edge. What I'm doing is, you can see there's actually two edges behind each other here, and I'm collapsing those down. This will be triangulations, which aren't very good to have, but this actually just makes it quicker. I'm going to deselect, dissolve those edges, because these edges, they're not needed. They're just extra from what's left over. You can also select multiple edges at the same time and then collapse them using this. Let's see. These faces up here looking all kind of messed up. So what I'm going to do is I can see the vertice right behind there of where that is. And what I'm going to do is literally just grab that vertice in X-ray mode, click on that vertice there, and press Alt-M, which will merge at last position, and it gets rid of those extra vertices. And now you have get rid of those, and then you also have these edges here that are not needed. So I'm going to X, dissolve edges, and now that gets rid of those. So now you've got this case looking thing. It needs a hinge, and it'll need 2 hinges and maybe 2 clasps right there. So let's see, how do I want to do that? One way to save on vertices with this is if you were to grab, I have all the faces selected on this line here. If I press X and collapse at edge, this will make this more into a edge there, but then I don't really like the way that changed the edges here. So let's see. I'm going to fix that. Collapse those edges. It is not collapsing one. Looks like there's an edge that we're not able to see from before. I'm going to just grab that, merge at last. And then right here, one way to fix some of the edges, because what I did was I merged everything together, which looks alright, but is not going to be very good for UV mapping later. So what I'm going to do is press K, pull out the knife tool, and I'm going to draw a line from there to there, and where we sit, I'm just going to click down and press enter, and now knife tool, you can add lines into the scene. So now this will be the seam on the case. Okay. Alright, so now I've got seams on the case that I like a little bit better. And now at this point, since I'm going to be doing a hinge on one side of the case, and I'm going to be doing a clasp on the other side, and probably on these sides, I don't want to use the mirror for both. The clasp I can actually do from here. Because I want a clasp that's going to be on both sides of the case. I'm just going to press E to extrude. And E to extrude down. And then also scale Y. And then I'm going to press 3 to the side view, Z for X-ray, and then I'm just going to move that in a little bit. And then Z to undo the X-ray. And I'll just kind of move that about there. And then I'll probably use something like a texture that'll look like a clasp. So that'll be the clasp on the left and right side. And this is also the reason I did that clasp from that kind of bottom, is so that when, if you wanted to, you could animate opening this and then the clasp will come off. In fact, what I'll also do is I'm going to press E to make a line, or Control R to make a line all the way around that. I'm selecting the inside of the clasp. I'm going to move this line a tad bit in. I don't want it to affect the clasp that already is there. So I'm just deselect that face there, move this in a bit. Select that part, and I'm just going to extrude this a tiny bit out. So that way I'll cut this top of this lid off before I actually bake out the texture, and I'll create the inside of this so that we can make two different parts for the lid, so you can add something into the box later. So at this point I am going to apply the mirror, tab out of edit mode, apply the mirror. Now you have all of these extra vertices. We're at let's see, 542 vertices, and we don't need all of those. So for example, let's see here, this one we don't need at all. I'm going to select all of those edges. And dissolve edges. These are not dissolving for some reason. It's probably because there's a face that I cannot see. Like, let me see, Alt. Ah, I know. One of the effects of using a mirror modifier is sometimes, right now I'm inside the box, when you're adding a mirror modifier it can do this. You'll end up having extra faces on the inside of the model. So in this case it added a face on the inside of that clasp that we don't need. So I'm just going to go and delete those faces entirely. And it did it to the inside of the extra clasp part too. I'm going to go and delete those faces as well. And now I can dissolve those edges. Okay. And there's also a face, I believe, right there, I think. No, that's actually from the class that's already on there. And I'll have to do the same thing on this side, because while mirrors are pretty nice little tools, they also mirror any mistake as well. Dissolve face. Dissolve edge. Okay, and now I want to make a clasp, probably I'm going to get rid of these lines here, pressing E, dissolve edge. And then I'm going to do the same with these right here. One thing is you have to deselect certain objects that you don't want to be, because if you dissolve the edge it'll get rid of other edges, so you have to dissolve them in ways that they get rid of the other things as well. And plus, since this object is kind of floating now, it's connected but it's not connected, it'll be very hard. It'll be kind of a UV mapping mess later. To fix that, I'm actually going to press K for the knife tool, and I'm just going to attach this here. And let's see here. I'm actually going to take the lid off so that I can see what's underneath there. So I'm going to press Z for X-ray, orthographic number 5, B for box select, select everything. I want to make sure I have everything selected here. Press box selection on all vertices. Selecting all of my edges. And also I want to have all of the edges for the lip. So I'm just going around and doing that. But each time I get to a tris is when it gets confused, because the tris is a terminating line. Anytime you meet up with a terminating line, it gets rid of, it will stop your selection. So I have to go around and select each face, and that whenever it hits a tris is when you run into a terminating line. Okay. Now I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and duplicate will bring this lid off, but this lid is now it's still part of the main piece here. So what I'll also have to do, aside from moving this up, press 1, and I'm going to use the marquee tool this time, using X-ray and using vertices. I'm just going to go over all of these vertices really quick. I can actually use the marquee tool for this. What I'm going to do is delete this top of the case off entirely. That's why I don't really care about if I'm selecting all of those. And I'm just going to hit ding that. I want to deselect that because I don't want any of the other part of the case to delete. So let's see. Alright, now if I press X and dissolve or delete vertices, now I have, looks like the top of my case completely gone. And now since all of this part of the case and this part of the case are still part of the same file, to separate them, I'm press A to grab both, and then let's see, P for buy loose parts, and then now they're separate pieces. Now I can work on the top lid or the bottom part of the case, and they're both going to be easier to work on. So I'm going to select the bottom part of the case, and I'm going to press backslash, which will isolate that piece by itself. When I got rid of a couple objects, it got rid of this little kind of the flat part to the other part of the case. So I'm actually, let's see, do I want to rebuild that? edges. I'm going to deal with recreating that that flap here in a minute. But I'm going to make an inside to this case. So I'm just select all those edges, press E to extrude, and then I'm going to scale on the X a little bit in. And actually I'm going to get rid of this line here until I need it later. There we go. And extrude down, pressing by the Z axis. I'm going to press E or Z for X-ray, which you'd think they'd just use X for X-ray, but X is the deletion thing. I'm going to press E to extrude again. Bring this down, about like that. And then pressing Z to come back out of that. Let's see from the side. Okay, that looks pretty good. To close this bottom up, I'm just going to press F, and that will do a, that'll fill that up. So now you have the bottom part. It's looking not bad. You might need some flat pieces, but this is 386 vertices, so that's not bad. Backslash, I'm going to go to the top part of the lid. And I'm going to do something similar. Right here, where the top piece where I got rid of some, it got rid of a face. I'm going to click there, there, and there, and press F to fill. This one is fine. And let's see here. I'm going to decide, do I even need that at all? I'm actually going to merge that little edge there to over there, and the same with that. It's basically getting rid of one vertex that is sitting out in the open there. Okay, move those out to the edge. Let's see here. It should be flat. Okay, I'm going to select this lip here all the way around, and I press 1 to go to the side view, Z for X-ray, E to extrude, then scale in a tiny bit, then E to extrude again, grab the Z, move up, E to extrude again, and alright, now I got that, and press F to fill. So now I have a top part of the lid and a bottom part of the lid. They, let's see, I could actually bring, let's Let's see, we're at 424. For just a little bit of added detail. Could go and extrude and just bring this down a little bit, so now it's almost a and then I want to add some hinges to the side of this, and I also want to make sure that the lid will work. So I'm going to do is bring the lid down, and let's see, what I want is this medium point, this little point here, to move where the hinge will be. So I'm going to grab that. Now when I rotate it, it'll rotate from that kind of an edge piece that I'll put in. I'm going to grab this and just move it to the top. So I want to add a hinge on this, and if I see, I can see where it moves. So I would need a little kind of a flat piece that would go right there. This is actually meant, I keep pressing the wrong buttons because I'm using a different computer. Move, grab, and just use the arrow keys to move that into position. And now as I open it, let's see, it's not too bad. Okay, that's actually not bad at all. Actually, I just changed my mind. I'm going to make the hinges are going to actually be a separate object, because that way I can actually animate those objects. This is actually, as I'm building this is actually going to be used in a game that I'm going to be creating myself. So I figure there is no such thing as practice or just building for nothing. It's always building for something. I'm going to press backslash to isolate this, and just click on the top and the bottom, and let's see here. I don't need this and I don't need that. Get rid of those edges, and now F, and I can fill that up. And then I'll do the same thing with this one right here. Dissolve, edges, F. And now I have just the top lid. I'm going to get rid of this line here. Oh, I thought I closed that. Okay. So now all I'm going to worry about is the hinge, and then the parts that open and close this will be separate. So that way you can animate them opening, so when the character clicks on them, you could show them open, like click click, like snaps, and then the top might open. So I'm going to press 1 to go into a side view here, and I want to make up a hinge that'll work pretty good for this. So let's see, how would I want to do a hinge? Make out of all those lines, I don't need half of them. Let's see. I'm going to make the hinges just over on these areas alone. So I'm going to go to there, separate that. Here, make a separation there. One, two, three, four, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see. Going to front view, back. Let's see. There we go. And scale on the Y. I'm going to move these faces in towards each other. About there. And then I'm actually going to grab this, and this. And go into side view, extrude out. That up and just scale to. What I'm trying to do is I need teeth. This is just a really kind of a simple way of making something that looks like a hinge that works, but this is also about how to get around using like a dowel shape or a cylinder shape. Scale, extrude, and scale directly down. One on the side here, and I'm going to go and press R to rotate this. Actually, I'm going to rotate it so that it's flat, and then scale. Let's see here. I'm going to switch to individual origin, and then I'm going to scale X axes. Grab, and I just want to move this up. And the point of all that is that you have this kind of look here, but if I grab, rotate the y-axis now, and it'll rotate this kind of edge piece here. And then I want to get rid of some vertices here that we don't need. So, let's see here. to, actually in this case, no, I don't want that all the way. Since I'm working on two objects that are the same, I can just mirror them. Now right now the mirror is in the wrong spot because by default it goes to the X. So I'm going to go to the Y. So now as I work on this I don't have to go back over and over again. Since this is going to be a line that goes all the way around the bottom, and I don't want it to dissolve those. And then I'm just going to select all of those, so it only selects the top edge, and dissolve collapse edges. I don't want it to collapse right there, so I'm just going to deselect those. Collapse edge. Just holding shift down, grabbing each and every one of these ones that I don't want to collapse. And collapse edges. So that gets rid of half of those. And then actually I can just get rid of these. Why I end up going over it a couple different times in different ways is actually just that some lines you can get rid of and some lines you just shouldn't get rid of. Like this one I can get away with because they're out of the way or they're non-visible, but for example this line here that goes all the way across the top might be a bad idea just for when I'm doing a UV map of this later on. See, 506 vertices. so. I'm going to dissolve those, and so now I've gotten rid of a couple and I just left the one there because that'll be better for UV mapping later. So now I'm going to go back to the case, the other part of it, and I need to make a clasp for that too. And I'm going to do the same thing of, let's see, using a mirror modifier. And let's see, I'm going to bring the other part in. And this I'm going to be a little bit more direct and move these lines into place. Alright, and now these I'm gonna finish cleaning up in a minute, but now we should see, if I go and rotate on the Y, it's not perfect, it's kind of boxy, but it's not bad. Rotate Y. Okay, so now I'm going to clean that bottom part up. Gonna do this one in a kind of a different fashion. Using the knife tool, pressing K, and just adding those lines in. That won't let us add a line all the way across now because it is now a terminating line. But can get rid of this line here. And that should be good enough. Let's see. So now I have the class attached to the box. I'll add I have the hinges attached to it. I'm actually going to parent. Now the lid is parented to the crate. I'm also going to name them. We'll call this hard shell box lid. Hard shell box bottom. When you render it out, it looks like this, which is kind of blah. That's why I'm going to be using the Cycles rendering engine. The front and back lid on this I'm going to add differently, and actually at this point I'll also apply the mirrors. Dissolve that edge. And so the clasps that are going to hold this box together I'm going to do separately, and I'll do them later on. For right now I'm just going to end up doing the end of this video. So right now these two pieces together are 504 vertices, which isn't bad. Still pretty low. But I want to make these parts look more... I'm going to do textures in a minute here. So for texturing, I'm going to end up doing is a couple things that help with doing textures for this. I'm going to select all of these edges right here. And I'm going to go under shading and mark the faces as smooth. And now this makes it so that it has kind of a more smoothest texture, the way that you'll see it. And then right now it doesn't, the model still does not look that awesome. It's looking pretty blah, and I kind of expected that. But that's why texture and materials that you use in building a model like this for a low poly model in a game are key to making it look cool. Alright, so right now our box is ready for doing some texturing on it. Now here's the part where I get sort of where my building becomes a little bit unorthodox from a lot of the videos that I've watched on YouTube. For a lot of people don't use this for anything to do with modeling low poly models, but I actually will use cycles rendering. Cycles rendering is a way of, it's a rendering engine that renders stuff out in a different sort of way. If you look at the way it renders out in Blender Render, you have all these really hard black edges. It looks very comic book inky, to be honest. Which is, if you actually want to have like a comic book feel or cartoonish feel, I would say go with Blender Render, because it actually gets that done pretty easily. But in our case, though, when we're trying to build this object here, I switch over to cycles rendering. And cycles rendering, if you are new to cycles, it's sort of confusing, but what it'll do is it's almost scientific lighting. So for example, right here, in cycles will render out where this light sits. If you are in Blender Render and I flip over to texture, it'll show where this light is and where it moves around. In cycles, it will as well, but you'll notice that the sides on this are not as dark and like black as the other. You can see where the hinges are, whereas in Blender Render you can't see any of that detail at all. So it works a lot more to cycles render works a lot more to rendering out I can't remember the kind of bounce of light. So the other thing that when you're using cycles, this little light here, in Blender Render that light is sort of like a big emission of light, but in cycles render that is mostly like a little light bulb. So for doing lighting in cycles, one, you're going to delete that light bulb. Also, I'm going to delete my camera because I don't even need it right now. And then I'm going to go and add a plane. And the reason I'm adding a plane is in cycles, one of the things you can do is you can tell an object you are now a light. So I'm going to go and add a mission, and then when I press Shift Z for rendering, now this light panel is about the same as a I can't remember the type of light it is, but they're those annoying lights that if you're in a work environment, for some reason somebody thought it would be nice to add all these buzzy lights that actually annoy the heck out of programmers. But alright, so I'm going to move this to 0, pull it up, scale that out, and now when it produces light, you'll see the light rendering down on top of it. I'm actually also going to duplicate this plane, pressing Shift D, and move it to the bottom of this case. And the reason I'm going to do this is we're going to bake this case out with the texturing on it, and as it bakes out, you're going to see the lighting from the top and the bottom are going to put sort of a... The reason I do this is if an object like this case is moved around in a video game world, I want the lighting or the shading that's going to be on that box to be pretty neutral, because I don't know where it's going to be. If it was an environmental thing like a rock that's going to stay in one spot, I would actually bake the texture and the lighting on at the same time. But in this case, this is going to be a texture that'll be made to make it look and appear as though it actually has parts on it and everything. This is also why I'm going to add the clasp on this later, because they'll actually add a shadow that'll be on there. Now if you look at it, it's all grainy. One of the reasons why this will be all grainy is because Cycles works on samples. So if you go to the little camera icon, which is your rendering icon, go down to render and then preview, set preview to 0. Now what it'll do is it'll keep rendering. You can see the samples going up over here, and it'll keep rendering and rendering and rendering until it gets a lot smoother and smoother and smoother. So for right now, I'm not going to render it out because there's nothing to render. This has no material on it and no textures. So for now, I'm just going to leave these here, and then going to pull up a node editor. Down here, if you grab on the bottom of here, you can move the window. The way the windows works in Blender is any one of these windows can be moved out. So you have this little edge piece here. You can drag this out. You can make a separate window there. So let's say you want to make this the graph editor. So now you have the 3D view, the graph editor. You can drag this down. We could open up a UV mapping editor. And then say you want to get rid of these views. Well, if you go and grab here, it'll automatically go up and get rid of that if all you have to do is just move forward. But say you have a timeline here and you have this graph editor here, and you want the timeline to show right here in this side of the window, but not the graph editor. Well, if you pull right here, all it's going to do is make another window, and that's just exactly what you didn't want. So if you want to get rid of the window that's on top, actually what you have to do is press up and then down, and then it'll move and you'll see an arrow that'll appear. So that's just how to move these windows around. And any of the windows, also you have to grab the very bottom lip of the window. If you grab right here, you're actually going to close the bottom panel. And to get that bottom panel back, just in case you did close it, right at the very, very bottom, like if I close my properties windows, because you'll have N and T opens your toolkit and your properties on either side of the object. But if you close the bottom window on accident, all you have to do is press this little plus sign and it brings it back, just in case you end up losing it, forget how to get it back. I've done that a few times, and it led to many frustrations when I first started using Blender. So if you go down in this bottom corner, I'm going to bring up a node editor. Now, Blender comes with a default of windows that you can set up. You can actually create your own windows as well. So for example, if I was going to do compositing, which is where you actually use UV layer and node editor, there's actually one directly for it. But you can also use for UV editing, there's another one. About the only windows that I actually do use is UV editing and default, and occasionally 3D view, which is an open 3D view, so you can get a better view of it later. But most of the views that Blender comes with, I don't even use those. But so right now, I want to make this case look sort of like a hard shell plastic that has a little bit of a shine to it, but not much. So what I'm going to do is go over here, drag this out, and there's a little ball that has kind of a black and white emblem on it. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this material hard plastic. And click Use Nodes, and this will add a material. And this one is a diffuse material. There's not much to the diffuse material right yet, you can't even tell. Both of them have the diffuse material on them. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm actually going to make a mix. The reason I like using mix materials is just that the diffuse material in Blender is very blah, but it doesn't really handle exactly like plastic, and it doesn't really handle like metal. So what I like doing is I'll add a glossy shader and a diffuse shader and drag those up here and here. So these are both materials that you can use in Cycles Render, and then this is a mixer. So if I am looking at this object right now, it is set. See, I like using for the shine. I'll use like Ashkeman Shirley, I think. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but. And if I were to move this mix shader all the way to the left, now it is actually making this crate look like chrome. So if you wanted to do something metally, it'll look like chrome. Now it doesn't look exactly that good because this is an object that is very angular. It's not very soft. If you wanted to make an object look soft, you'd actually use let's see how this would look. You'd have to do a multi-resolution on it. And multi-resolution will make everything very, it'll look very nice and curved. If I go over here and let's see, set everything to smooth, you'll see that. But you'll also see that you lose all of those edges are all gone. That's because you need to actually add lines to this to make it look nice and curved. And also the only other thing is this will bring this up to like 1,382 vertices, which is not what we want at all. However, I might, if I was doing this model like the sword model earlier, I might make a high poly, nice looking model of this crate and then use it to make a texture. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'll show you how to use some of those tools later. So right now this crate is looking chrome. I don't want it to look chrome, but I want it to look a little bit shine. So I'm going to bring it down to a little bit of diffuse, kind of make it kind of hard looking there. And I'm going to crank up the shine roughness a little bit. And that looks pretty good for it. Depending on what I want to use it for. So I'm going to do something where I'm going to use what's called Vertex Paint. Vertex Paint, when I press V, will open up here. And what we're going to do is paint on the vertices. Now Vertex Paint only works on vertices. So even though this face here is selected and you want to color the face right here, it's not going to work. It'll only select the faces that are on the edges to the vertices. So right now I have Vertex Paint in, I'm trying to paint, but nothing is happening. And also I forgot that I also I accidentally, when I went into, I thought when I backed up it would get rid of, oh there we go. I wanted to keep these UVs flat, like that. And let's see, I'm gonna just bring shine on this down a tad. Alright, so now I'm pressing V, I'm in vertex paint, I'm trying to paint, and nothing's happening. That's because Blender, your object is, even though it looks gray, it's actually white. And the other thing is Blender's color is set for white by default. So you're basically painting white on white, and you can't see anything. Which is kind of annoying of them, that I kind of wish they would change that to be a little bit different. But so in this case I want this to be kind of a hard shell case in sort of a safety orange and yellowish type color. So I'm going to start painting. I'm going to make my paintbrush bigger, and it won't do the bottom of the case because they're separate. I'm going to press backslash so I can select all faces of this. I might make the inside of this in a different material as well, by the way. But there I have about all the faces painted, but I don't want it to be all that. So for selecting specific faces with paint, I'm going to go and press C for the marquee tool, and then tap down on the faces that I want. So we're going to be using a mask. And this will make it so that I can paint certain faces without painting other faces. Every time you use the marquee, you always have to kind of remember to turn it back on, because anytime you press the deselect button, it just turns the marquee off. And marquee is just pressing C. Okay, so I want to make these parts of the lid yellow. And actually, before I move on, since I want both sides of this case to be the same color, I'm actually going to do paint this together. Press V for vertex paint. I'm just going to paint this whole lid this orange color to start with. You can also, if you don't want to use the marquee tool, you can actually just select the faces in edit mode and then tab out of edit mode into vertex paint, pressing V, and do it that way too, in case the objects that you're trying to select are actually easier. Also, if you want to deselect while using marquee, just hold the middle mouse button down and you'll select, and then you can deselect as well. Okay, it looks like selected everything. Go to kind of a yellow color. And let's see, I want to press V to deselect, back into V, C for the marquee tool. Actually, I have to click down here, which will turn it into masking mode. I'm going to press A to deselect everything, and then back to the marquee so I can select the faces I want. Now, while vertex paint is very, very basic, you can add things like, for example, if you wanted to add a little bit of rust or something into it, you could discolor it. Vertex paint is mainly what I'll use is for like a base coat paint that will be done into the texture. If I wanted to add more detail, I might use like Photoshop or GIMP later on. I didn't select those. Now that I've gotten this yellow on here, if I wanted to, I could also go and get kind of more of an orangish color, darker. Now right now, if you tab into your Shift-Z for seeing how it looks, you won't see anything. It's because it's not even attached yet. So if you wanted to see it when it's connected to these, and this is part of the reason I almost like cycles, is that everything is laid out in this little block so you can see everything in a much more visual way. I'm going to add an attribute, and then press C-O-L, capital C-O-L, with lowercase o-l. And you have to do, when you add an attribute, you have to add it exactly the way it's spelled. And now you have that inside as kind of an orange color. It's not what I want to go for. But right now, and actually to make things faster, I'm actually going to take this, move it here, press Alt-P, and I'm going to clear a parent. To add a parent to an object, all you have to do is press Control-P, and Alt-P will clear that parent. And now I'm going to make these two parts, and I'm going to join them. So now I can actually select both parts at the same time and see them rendering out together. I'm going to make, actually, this is another way you can use the vertex paint, is actually by selecting the faces in edit mode. This also means I'll have to change where the lid will be later on. So I'll have to, when I deselect these parts, I'll have to put them all back together so that the lid works again. But now, when I go into pressing Tab out and go into V, they're already selected. So I'm going to make it a gray or a black color. And then I tab again, back in edit mode. Press 5 so that I can use the inside of this with the perspective in there. And actually, let's see here. I'll do this in a second because I see vertices I don't need. And then I'll just go tab to get out of edit, V to go back into, I already was in, and now I can make the inside of that kind of a blacker color. And I want to make that edge lip too, so I'm going to Alt. Looks like since they have some terminating lines, they're not selecting, so I have to select them myself. Tab, and now it's colored. And then if I go, now that's looking a little bit better. That's looking more like I want it. These lines right here are actually not helping out. So I am going to dissolve those. There we go. I don't think that's actually, I don't think it'll really change it anything. But actually, I'm going to make those go back. I thought that would help because you have these edge lines here that I'm going to actually maybe crank up the diffuse a little bit. Adding a little bit of shine to the box also makes it makes the edges seem a little bit not as harsh. So, and then there was something else I wanted to get rid of while I was at it. Get rid of those. Dissolve edges. And this inside lip, I really don't need. I can get rid of that and it still looks fine. So now the case is pretty much ready, but you know, it still doesn't look like plastic. It looks pretty meh. So I want to add a, let's see, I'm going to go and bring this window over here. I'm going to actually turn off the, press T to close that box and N to close the other box. So now I have one side to see the box on. And then I'm going to press UV image. And now I'll bring open. I got a picture of some bed liner. And this is kind of very, very, very hard plastic. And what I'm going to end up doing is, let's see here, go over to, this is where it's going to get into some UV unwrapping. And UV unwrapping, this part can get kind of confusing, that's why I'm going to go over it, try to explain everything as I go. Because Blender and UV unwrapping kicked my butt when I first started using this program. So, have your case, and this has a vertex colors to it. When you add the vertex colors will always show up as COL. You can call it any name you want, and that's what's giving it the color at the moment. What I'm going to do for a little bit of displacement mapping to make it look more hard plastic looking is I'm going to go to shader, or actually no, I'm going to input an attribute, and I'll just kind of put it right here, and then I'm going to add a texture, image texture, and then I'll select the bed liner, and then I'll run this attribute into the vector, and this will make sense in a little bit here. I'm going to take this image, and this bed liner isn't the best image to be using, but I'm going to show how you can use an image that isn't even made that very good for an image for this sort of thing, and use it for for a better using it as an image. So I want to actually make this, I'm going to make the plastic look hard, I'm going to make the little latches look metal, the inside I think I'm going to make metal, and then the outside I think I'll still be plastic too, those little kind of hard edge things. So what I'm going to do for I'm going to make another material here, and what I'll do, because I already like this setup here and it already has a shine to it, instead of creating a brand new total new texture, I'm just going to press plus, and this will actually make a second version of the original. And I'm going to go down here and select that second version. So now it says hard plastic 1, hard plastic 1, which means that all of this box is considered hard plastic 001. But we want to have two separate textures. So I'm going to take hard plastic 001 and go back to the original hard plastic. And the second one, I'm going to change this one to metal. But both are the same, still the same material right now. So I want to make the inside of this crate more metal looking. It should probably be soft, squishy, but I'll deal with soft and squishy stuff later. So I'm going to grab and select all of these faces here, and then I'm going to select all the faces to the latch, and all the faces to these latches too, or the hinge really. Technically, since I'm doing two sides to this object, I could just use a mirror modifier for it, but when I'm doing UV editing, I actually want to stay away from mirror modifiers because mirror modifiers make the object look more digital, and one of my things is I try to get away from making objects look completely digital. So I just made both of these materials a metal, but they're no different than each other yet. So right here I'm actually we're gonna go to this roughness, and I'm gonna bring this down a little bit, and then I'm gonna bring this mix shader down more there, so that'll make it kind of more of a shine. And then I'm actually going to bring the diffuse to kind of middle of there, and this will make things look a little bit more shiny for the metal pieces. It's kind of a brown metal. I might change it because usually metal isn't really... Actually, I'll do that right now. I'm going to go, since they're all selected, tab or T to open up my menu. And then press T to close that, and I'm just going to and since those faces that I'm dealing with right now were not selected, I'm actually going to have to select those faces in a minute and call those all metal material as well. Okay. So I think I got everything there. And let's see, so going to tab and assign. So now that lip is now assigned that as well. And now I'm going to get to work on making the inside of this looking metal and the outside looking hard plastic. So now one thing is, since all of these, what I could do is I'm going to make two UV layouts, one for metal, one for plastic, and then actually I'll make a third before I bake. And that UV will be the final UV, which will also be set up so that you can easily edit this box later on in another program if you want to. So what I'm going to do for right now is just select everything. I'm actually going to close down Vertex Paint and just go select all, unwrap. Actually, I hit Smart Unwrap. I do 3, and this will actually unwrap everything onto the bed liner texture. And under metal, I'm actually going to disconnect that image entirely, and you'll see why in a moment here. Under hard plastic, I'm going to add a converter, mathematical, I'll change that to multiply, and then I'm going to run color into multiply and that value into displacement. Now, when I render this out, let's see, hard plastic. Oh, that's why. The reason why nothing is coming out now when I want is because under attribute I have to punch in the name of the UV map. So this I can actually call plastic. So I'm going to take that, I'm just going to do a copy and paste, and now you see that you have all this weird looking bumps and stuff on it. That's because all of it is going off of this bed liner texture. So we're not using the bed liner as the color, you're using the bed liner as the actual displacement. So if I crank this value up, you'll start seeing that it's all kind of bumping out everywhere and kind of nasty, but I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look more dense, so I'm going to just scale this out. And I'm going to scale it way out. And now it's starting to look more grumpy, bedliney. I might change these orange things to be a metal color. Scale it out some more, and now it's starting to look more like bed liner. And also this will make a very good normal displacement map for later on. Up here is a little bit meh. To edit that by itself, you can actually select those faces, and you can see they're actually way over here. So if I wanted to make these more not so squidged up, I can actually press scale scale X, and I'll stretch those out. And that makes those look better. The reason this sort of works is because all of this, its bed liner is just a really simple kind of crackly texture that's just being used mainly scale X, so that it gives it a kind of a rugged feel to this top. I'm actually going to bring this value down. I just bring it up really high just so I can see what it'll look like. Try it with 1. And I can actually bring it down to 0.5. It doesn't have to be that crunchy everywhere. Okay, and then, so now that's the plastic UV texture. I think what I want to do is I want these edges to be metal, or I want to keep them plastic. I think I'm also going to try this. I'm going to go and press V for vertex paint. Going to press T. Vertex paint has a few different tools in here. It's got draw, mix, blur. About the only two that I'll use is like draw, maybe darken, and blur. But I'm gonna go and hit blur, and then I'm gonna press F, and that'll scale down this. And I'm actually going to see what happens if I kind of blur this orange together. With the yellow. It's kind of a pink actually. No. Don't like that. I think I've changed my mind on this. I'm going to grab all of those edges. I don't really like that pink or salmon color, whatever you want to call it. And so I selected all those. I'm going to go into vertex paint, and I'm actually, one way to select the same color, I have to go under draw again because blur won't work for that. I'm going to go and use the eyedropper and find the same yellow. This is going to be a little bit of a darker yellow. Looks like the bottom half of my metal pieces was not gotten, so I'm going to fix that in a second here. Okay, And the other thing I'm going to also do is make those smooth. And then I'm going to fix the bottoms of these. It's not similar, not the exact color, but it doesn't matter that much. It's okay, I kind of like that better. Still have a little bit of salmon color left over I need to get rid of. Gonna click on the, where'd it go? Color down here, and then the eyedropper, and that way I can quickly go over those. Also press C, select that. And then just to make sure they're kind of mixing together, I'll just blur them up a little bit, and that fixes that part. So now the color is mostly on it. Let's see, it looks like I have that little salmon on the lid. I actually don't mind that for some reason. So now we have plastic on there, and then I want to create another one that's going to be for the metal. So I'm going to go down to metal, and let's see, go to open, and let's see, I got this aluminum, kind of a, and I'm just going to select the insides. And now this side, this time, is where it's going to get... You don't want to UV map this until you've selected a new UV map. So you want to go to plus, add a new UV map. I'm going to bring the camera down as well. That's almost more of a techie superstition, just because sometimes these UV maps get confusing. I'm going to go and call this UV map metal. And then I'm going to select all the faces that I want to use. Let's see. Actually, I don't even have to. And this is why. You don't have to select those faces for the metal. The material base itself is going to have a UV map attribute just called metal. So now when I go and, let's see, open metal, which I thought I already did. Now it's in here. And then if I go, hold shift and drag these nodes over. Alright, wanted to do them together, they went separate, oh well. Add a shader, let's see, shader is going to be, not a shader, converter, math, and I'm going to plug that color in, plug that into displacement. And I'm going to set this to 0.05. And then I'll bring up the UV image editor over here, bring up that aluminum plate. And now when I tab and select all these faces, it's automatically set up for the other map that was originally done. However, this isn't going to work very good for the metal UV map. The original map, the bed liner, the plastic was made, it was just sort of thrown on in any way it's made to be. It's not meant to look pretty. It's meant to look all kind of raggedy, like bed liner just put in any old direction, because it's not really going to be seen that much. Like, the character will walk by it, you'll see it, but it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be beautiful. It's meant to look like kind of raggedy, icky. And plus, when you have a material on this and a normal map, it'll look cool, but it's not going, you know, it's not meant to look pretty. For the metal, however, this is not going to look right. So what I'm going to do is press 5. Now the reason why I can't see anything is that I have this panel in the way. So I'm going to go and press H to hide that panel. So now that's the only panel that'll render out too, but I'll have to bring it back. I'm going to press 7 to go over the top of this. And I'm going to select the inside face of this, and I'm just going to go and press U, project from bounds. Now this means that since this is by the metal is selected here, then if I select plastic, it's not going to be selected. Metal, it will be selected. Everything is selected also because of the materials, but I only want certain faces to be selected under metal. So if I'm going to go above it, actually I'm going to go all the way around this object here, press Z, and then project from view. And textures, I think I got these at a, let's see, scale Y. The metal and the bed liner, I forget where I got that. The metal textures I got from like a free texture site that I just ran across. Some textures I'll literally take a camera with a high megapixel on it and just use that. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just going to take and select. I'm actually going to hide this bottom as well. But you can just use a high megapixel camera and that'll work fine for doing texturing. I'm going to do the same with this and just do that. And press U and project from bounds. That'll project it from all the way around. Actually, that projects it the long way. I'm going to actually press project from view and then press R90 to rotate this and just scale it along that metal. That's good enough. And then I'm going to select inside faces and this outside face. And go into Z for X-ray, project from view. let's see, I'm going to project it from view. Or I could do that. The nice thing with using smart UV unwrapping is that it will, basically it takes it apart for you and makes it into little islands that you can use. Like for example, doing it by projection this way, these walls right here are going to have almost no UV map on them. It'll look metal, it'll look scrunched, it'll just look messed up. So if I press project from view this way, now you'll have a metal texture on those as well. Scale Y, I'm just going to bring that out a little bit. These I don't ever really check to be perfect or anything like that. They're just sort of basic metal. And also, this object isn't what I call a hero object. It's not like the sword that I made earlier, which will be on the main character, and you'll see it often. It's going to be, you'll see these often, but you'll really not care. They're just boxes that you'll get your goodies in. Your med kits, your weapons, your monster repellent, I don't know. Okay, project from view. Over here in the UV editing, everything works pretty much the same as it works over on the other side. I'm actually just scaling these out a little bit for the texturing. And then the sides I have to UV unwrap as separate because right now you can hardly see them. I'm not worried too much about the inside because you're not going to see that part underneath there. Project from view. Okay. And then I'm going to bring the lights back in because otherwise you can't hardly see anything. So I'm going to press Alt-H and that'll unhide any objects in the scene. They're not on a separate layer, they're just hidden from the scene, so it makes it easier to see what's going on. Okay, this needs to be changed to metal. And it's also the wrong color. I thought I'd fixed this before. There's another thing I can do with this if I'd like, being that the metal is by itself one material, and if I don't want to go over and use the UV unwrap colors, or not the vertex coloring, and go over all that and fix it, I can just disconnect these two right here, and now it's all one main color. It's actually the color, I think, it's actually white, but you're seeing it with this added to it. So I'm just actually going to delete these, and I'm going to make this one kind of a darker color. And I'm going to bring the metal down to 0.03 because it is actually too scratchy on the inside there. It's still way too scratchy. 0.00. And one other thing I could do for the metal is I can select all faces, which is going to select all of those faces that were used, but it'll also select all the ones on the inside, and just scale those out. And that'll make the metal, should seem a little thinner. Actually disconnect the displacement and see how that looks. So the displacement map is making that metal look way too... It's not supposed to look that hard. It's just supposed to show up. And this right here, where you see one line here and one line here, that's where this metal is repeating, and I don't want it to do that. So, right now you can't see it, but I know what it looks like. And I want that to project from bounds, but when it projects, I believe it's projecting the other direction. So I'm going to go rotate 90 degrees, scale X and scale Y. And then, oh wait, that's why I didn't change this to multiply, so it was set to add, which makes it just humongously amount. So now I can go to 0.0.05. There. Now the metal on the inside is looking like metal, but it also has a little bit of displacement, but it's not too much displacement. And I'm actually also going to put that in the negative. Displacement mapping will work. You can either make it displaced inward or outward. If it's in the negative, all the cracks and stuff will be going down, whereas if you have it the other direction, all the cracks will be pushing out. Okay, so now we have our bed liner and our metal inside of both the top and the bottom lid, and make sure these latches actually have a little bit of a caustic, what's called, where you can see the light, which is actually from the other lid. So I'll be moving those apart from each other before I set this up. Kind of go and grab all these faces. And if I go down to the bottom here, I can press this, and you'll select islands that come with it. Islands are whenever the UV map itself is separated from the other. So you can see one was behind the other one. These parts right here are have way too much displacement on it, so I'm going to actually bring that down about 3.01. There we go, that's not so much. Also, this is looking kind of too chromy, so I'm going to add a tint of blue. And I'm also going to bring this shine down. Okay, and now I think we're almost ready for the last UV map. So the last UV map that we're going to make is one that'll be for the money. So that means I'm going to do a deselect everything, and then I'm going to go put a plus, and this one I'll be calling hard shell crate texture. Actually, I just hard box, whatever. And where this will be going is actually going to be on a texture we haven't even created yet. So one of the things that you have to do before moving on is I have to unwrap this. And I thought we just unwrapped it all over the place. That's not exactly what we want to do. What we want to do is I'm going to go into edit mode, and I need to mark some seams on this thing. So, let's see, marking seams is not my forte. I can get them to go somewhat okay, but not as great. But you have to figure out where to put these seams on this box to make it come out looking like so it's understandable. So I'm going to go and separate these latches. Are going to have, I'm going to mark a seam on those. And then here's the hard part, or probably one of the hardest things, is figuring out where all of this will come out. If you don't visualize this in your mind of how something can unwrap. So I think that should maybe work. Seam, because this way you'll have, this should unwrap from that side face down, this should unwrap across. Mark seam there. press Tab to deal with these by themselves. Mark seam. Going to mark a seam there. And mark seam there. Try to do this all together the same way. That's why I jump around from one to the other one. Mark seam. Okay. The way I'm making this, I'm making a little cut there, and hopefully the way that this will unwrap is so that these will come out from each other. And I think I'll actually mark them like this. Basically, you kind of have to think about, when you're unwrapping, think about all of these edges like a piece of cardboard, or like a big sticker that's going to go over this entire object. And how do you want that sticker to come out? And this can be kind of the hard part. But I kind of think about, for example, during 4th of July, if you ever had one of those little bitty firework tanks, those little like cardboard tanks that has it all just goes together with little pieces of cardboard that make a turret. Think about it that way, and that's how this whole thing has to come apart. Okay, mark that. The point of all of this is to make all of this model come out as one UV map where you can separate just about every part of this. It'll come out, it'll be easy to edit later on. You could bring it into Photoshop, or GIMP, or whatever program that you like, and then you can edit this later. You can add, you know, extra bits into it to make it look better. Okay, almost done with these. Okay, dun, dun. Looks like I forgot over here. Mark seam. So now I have to decide how do I want to unwrap these edges of the box. The top part already has, these will already unwrap for the edges, and then the side parts I'm going to have come out as separate pieces. And actually, I see I forgot this part here. Right here I found when I select these, there's actually two vertices that are in there that I don't need. So I'm going to mark those seams that I've already gone over, and then I'm going to get rid of those two vertices. And all I have to do that is go into X and dissolve vertices. And it looks like they are on the other side too, so I'll just select those, dissolve vertices. And then I'll go back into edge selection again and get back to marking off seams. The edge parts, I'll actually have to put this line right here so that when they come out as a seam, it'll actually have a cut here. I won't have to worry about that here because this will actually come out as one long piece. Okay. And I'll have to mark those edges as well on the top too. Mark seam. And then the inside of the box is actually, I'm going to make a separate outside of the UV wrapping, so you'll have all the yellow pieces will be one part. The inside of the box will be its own separate piece. A lot of time in UV and wrapping, try to keep everything all together on one part. But these are all going to be separate islands, and it's just so that I can tell what part is what. Okay, so now I think I've UV unwrapped everything around here to come out. It should look okay. Mark those seams. Have my hard box UV unwrap set, and now to make it, open up a second window, go to UV editor. And then when I select all this will come out as all this weird stuff that's from the other. But when I go to unwrap, everything will unwrap in these kind of nice, neat, packed areas. One other thing, a lot of time, if you're doing this, you might end up wanting to put these in left, right, which side is which. Often I don't usually do this. I just kind of go for however they come out, and I might move them apart from each other. Like these parts are actually the latches. So to make this come out as a new texture, what I'll do is I'll add in a texture image. This is going to be the output. I'll put in an input is the attribute, and the attribute is going to be called hardbox, which is the name of the UV map for all of this. So each one of these has their own separate UV maps. And this image I'm going to actually, let's see, call a new. I'm going to actually make this, actually I'll just stay with the 1024 pics, and we'll call this hard shell box texture, and I'll change that color to a little bit of an orange. The color that is on this will have nothing to do with the texture, it's just mainly so you can see where your texture is. That way when you're flipping through you can tell which color is which. And then I have to, since we have two materials, I have to actually duplicate. So if I go under image texture, I'll select hard shell box texture. Then under hard plastic, I'll also have to duplicate those two as well. Otherwise you'll only have input coming out for one part and not the other. So I have the attribute hard box, then we'll have a image texture, select hard shell box texture, and then move the vector to this. So now what's happening is you have the color coming from the vertex paint over here, which is going into the glossy and diffuse shader up into this mix shader that is going into this. Then the displacement is coming from this UV map for the plastic, going into this bed liner case, going into this multiply to make the displacement look more real. On the metal, you have the same setup over here, just it's going through the aluminum, and then all of this is going to come to the output over here. And then the last thing is just to bake this texture out. I actually bring my compression to 0, 16-bit output for colors, and under bake, okay, let's see, it's making sure everything, and also I have to turn back on H. Have to turn back on these lights that'll come down on it so that you can actually render out and you'll see it. And other things, since I know this one right here was having a caustic from the lighting on the other case, I'm going to move this a little bit over so that it doesn't get affected by that caustic off the metal. And now, cross your fingers, deselect everything, but only select this so that it's not showing that, and bake. And now that's the texture baked out. It's looking a little bit kind of grainy because it's a small texture, so to fix that problem, I'm actually just gonna make a separate one. We'll just make a new texture. So instead of saving this out, gonna make a new one, but this one hard shell texture, and I'll set that to 3000 pixels. Okay, and then all I have to do is select that one instead of the other one, and do that in both sides. And bake. Alright, so I'm back. This one is looking a little bit better. It looks like you can tell where the bed liner area is. And actually one thing that I kind of decided on this is I don't really like this yellow color that's on here, so I'm actually going to go under hard plastic and just disconnect both of these here, the vertex coloring. I'm going to make it kind of an orange color, like Coast Guard orange. And I'm also going to lower the amount of gloss that's coming off that. Okay, so now I'm just getting rid of completely the vertex coloring. I can add it back if I want, or add details later. I think I just want to use this kind of orange color. And since this one still isn't really as close enough to getting that bed liner look that I wanted, I'm going to add another one called this Hard Shell 3, and I'm going to make this one a pretty big one, 4000 pics, which will should come out to be pretty good for a normal map. Okay, and this one will take a lot longer, so I'm just going to skip the video ahead. Alright, the texture has come out. It's looking good enough, I think. And now, what I'll do with the image is we'll go and I'm going to pack as PNG and save the image as Hard Shell 3. It's already saved there. So now that saves out. The other thing on this that I want to do is I want it to have a label on the top that'll be like medical, or whatever kind of type of box this will end up being. Baked out the textures. I've also, in the middle of the kind of the cut between video, I've also baked out a texture that has black on it too, in case I want to have one for tactical. things like that. So now, since we have a texture baked out for both of these, I can actually go down here, disconnect entirely the this image here from image texture, and now under metal and plastic I can actually get rid of both of these, and I can do to the hard plastic, I can do the same. So now the only UV layout is the one called hard box. Tab onto it, now it all connects to this, but it won't connect to the bed liner anymore because we can just consider that non-existent now. So now I'm going to go to hard shell 3, so that is this image entirely, and I can go over to metal and do the same thing and change this UV to hard box, and then change this as well to hard shell 3, and now it's taking its data directly off of this layer. So now you don't have to have multiple UV layouts into it. And now I could simply go take this and add materials to it and call it a day for making this case. But you'll probably want to know how to put a texture on the top of here, to call it like medical or ammo or whatever you want to put on the side of there. Now you could just take this image right here into Photoshop and try to Photoshop one in, but you'll also look at it, it's kind of hard to find a spot where you can do that. That's why it's usually better when kind of UV unwrapping. I didn't unwrap this so that it could be just placed on top of it. Mainly that's because I just usually do it right in Blender. So in this case, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to save this out, and I'm going to open up a new blend file, delete the box, I'm going to grab the camera. What I'm going to do is generate my own texture. I'm going to change the camera to 2000 by 2000, 100% resolution, and I'm going to press N, and I'm going to zero out its location so it'll go directly to the middle, and then I'm going to zero out its rotation as well so it'll be pointing straight down, and then I'm going to drag it up a little bit. And then I'm also going to delete that light, and I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to drag this up here. I'm going to switch over to cycles again, and I'm going to add, this is going to be an emission, and below it, down here, I'm going to set for the film is going to be transparent, meaning now everything will be like a PNG looking down on it. So I want to make this sort of an interesting label on it that'll be a first aid. So I'm going to press 0 to go directly into my camera, and then under camera options I'm going to switch to orthographic. And then so what I want is an emblem on it that'll look like kind of like a cross, but a little bit different. It'll be like the Red Cross, but a little more interesting. So I'm going to go and add plane, and I'm actually going, let's see, I'm going to try this. I'm going to tab, go into edit mode, and I'm going to cut this plane twice. And delete. Then I'm going to go and add a mirror, which is going to mirror top and bottom. And going to create the shape that I want. Let's see here. So, let's see. Grab X1. Grab, so G, negative Y 0.05. No, not that far. Not that. G, Y. Actually, G, negative Y 0.5. There we go. And then I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. And that is more what I was looking for. Lining these two up, it's getting a little weird, but I can get rid of those by going into X or Z and just merging. So now those are one piece. And let's see here. I'm going to grab those, and we're going to go and grab one, and then grab negative Y1, and that's the shape I was looking for. And then I can also go and add text. Let's see here. I'm just going to use the Blender's generic text that it comes with. Let's see here. I'm just going to save this out. Okay, so I went and just wrote supplies on here because I figured this is going to be a big crate. And when I render this out from it comes out looking like this. For the material on this, all I'm going to do is, let's see, I can go to diffuse and just crank this up to white, or what I could do for this is, just to get it brighter, I could set it to emission. Then all I'll have to do is, let's see here, sampling, I'm going to use samples of 20 and then render out this image. So that's why the camera's involved, is you can render out images for things as well on this. Save as image. I'll just call it label. After I've got this saved, I'm just going to open up the, where'd it go? Hard shell case again. And now, what we'll do is I'm gonna let's see. I'm gonna call this add UVMap will be just called decal. And let's see, I'm gonna go to hard plastic material and add texture, image texture, and then also add an attribute. I'm just gonna duplicate this attribute, click it into the vertex, and then this one is, call it decal. And then what I should be able to do is just run it into the alpha channel as soon as I get it UV mapped. So click down here, going to tab out of all of that. And I'm going to click on supplies. And let's see here. I'm going to isolate the object, press 7 to look down on it. Rotate this image by -90. eject from view. And just enlarge that up there. And what should happen is if I open the supplies one, and let me try this. Looks like it is on there, but it's all over the place. So it looks like if I run it that way, I need to figure out what to do with all of the other UV layers, and in some cases, let's see, make sure that those are all selected. What I'll end up doing is actually, this is a really simple but kind of stupid thing, because to try and get rid of the UV layers on those, I'll just move all of them over to the middle of a blank space. And then just grab the layers that I like. And that's kind of a cheating way of doing it, but at the moment I can't think of how to get rid of them the normal, the good way. And now it says supplies, although it's upside down. So I'm just going to rotate 180. Actually, no, it wasn't. I'm looking at it the other way. So now you have supplies, and it's all orange, mainly because it's coming probably from this base. And then you have this yellow color. But if I take it and run it, is it here? There you're seeing the orange color and the other. Let's see, I'm actually going to duplicate this. I grab both, shift, move this one down and this one down, and then run the alpha right into there. Let's see what that does. In this case, part of the reason this is doing this is because of the colors that I used before. So what I can do is I can actually just change, I'm going to disconnect this piece right here, change the glossy over to a diffuse because it'll already have a diffuse in it, and then I could go and change this to hard shell for, or no, it's actually hard box is the name of the UV layer. I have to spell it exactly, and then instead of label I can change this to hard shell 3 and move this into there. Now when you move to one side, actually I need some lights again. have the orange from 1, and then when I move it this way, you can see the supplies label on there, but I want it to show up bright. And also I wanted this to be a diffuse, not a glossy. Let's see here. That's a little closer. There we go. So it's a little bit, I was kind of on the fly, but that's kind of what I was trying to do. And then also, if you wanted to make this a little kind of cooler, you can go into the front of this, grab these faces, project from view, move those down a bit. I'm going to scale Y a little bit. And now it'll have supplies there. It also cuts right around those edges. And this way you can put a label onto your box without it having, labels and things like on it. And also to deal with the orange, which is a little bit darker because I'm going to bake out a new texture, is I'm just going to raise these two. Since both of these have the same texture, they'll actually both raise at the same time. So now we have a supply texture with the letters all done up on it. Now all you have to do is bake it again. And this time, let's see, I'll go to this. I just want to make sure I have everything set up right. I'm going to actually call this, let me see, $4,000 name. Baked, but this is all that came out, and the reason why that came out is I had the wrong thing selected. I selected the decal and the rendering to be on decal. It should have been here. So that's the UV map for the decal minus the thing that'll be on there. So I'm going to try this one more time. So select orange. Just do a double check. Oh, that works. So actually I found out, because I was just thinking about this, is if it's coming from the color from right here, I should be able to just run the alpha directly into the color itself, and then it'll be white because it already was white. And that way, if you wanted to, you can brighten this up, you can make it go away completely. Right now I'm going to just put it at 0.5. So it's right in the middle of both of those. And also, the neat thing about when you render these out is you also get the bump maps in it too. So I'm going to do a render again, and this time, one thing about doing UV layers or UV mapping is sometimes you'll get things like this, where it is getting it, but it got rid of the other half. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to render this out one more time, give it a try. If not, I can actually just use this and combine two layers together. But another thing I'm going to do before I proceed is I'm actually going to duplicate these two light, what do you call them? Light panels, and rotate on the Y 90 degrees. Actually, I have to set to medium point. Rotate Y 90, and now you have light that's coming from all around, and that's just mainly so that I can give them a little bit more, let's see, Shift D, and let's see, duplicate, rotate, Z 90, that was messed up, rotate Z 90. Now it's actually way too lit. So I'm going to bring these out a little bit and just bring emission down to 1. And we'll try rendering this out one more time. No, actually just make a different texture. Hard shell. And here it goes. Alright, so third, fourth, fifth time, whatever, one of those times is a charm. And now I finally have the texture that baked out. It's got the supplies label on it. And what I'll just do, pack as PNG, save as image. Let's see, I'm just gonna save over hard shell 4, which is a screw up, but the same amount of pixels. And then we're almost done with using cycles for anything here. Alright, so now all I have left to do is I'm going to make one new texture, and the last texture that I'll be making with cycles, which is I'm just going to call hard shell box normal. And let's see here. Going to damn. Forgot to press OK. So hard shell normal. And for a normal map that I'm going to make, we don't need this alpha channel at all. So I'm actually just going to disconnect that alpha because I don't want the label to have its own thing coming out of it. And it actually probably won't even care about color. And then I'll just go and down here select hard shell normal, and under metal, do the same thing, and then I'll just go to the baking, and instead of combine, switch to normal, bake. It should bake out really fast. Presto, there is your normal map, which you can put into in Unity assets as well, and make with a separate, I think, material, or how you connect those, but I save them just because. So we have the hard shell normal, and then finally all we have left is, I'm going to bring this down, switch over into Blender Game, these, since in Blender Game these actually don't do anything anymore because they don't emit light, and move them to level 2. The materials don't work anymore either because we're in game mode or Blender Render. So I'm just going to add a new material. I'll call this hard shell box.g for game. Going to get rid of those materials that were on that, and going to add the texture that we just made. Hard shell box with label. So now if we switch into material, we don't see anything because we need a light, because Blender Game doesn't use the same. So now you have this with the label on it. I'm going to go down to geometry normal, and I'm just going to set this to 0.05. I might bring it up a little bit more. There we go. That just shows what it'll look like when it has the a lot of what are they called? Normal on it, or what it can look. And then last, let's see, the only thing I have to do now, highlight both of them, change by loose parts, P, and let's see, go from the side. Now I have to reattach this to the top. Grab, bring this down. Gonna grab this light, and I'm just gonna duplicate the light back and forth. This is too shiny, but let's see, rotate Y. Not precisely where I want it. Close enough for right now. The other textures that are on it, like it has the nice bed liner kind of look to it. This is also kind of bed liner. I didn't really want that. If I wanted to fix that, I could just add a separate material for that, and it would be two different materials, one being glossy. The material shader, what I'll actually do for the specular is I'll add kind of a, let's see here, kind of an orange color to it, just a little bit. This doesn't really matter. Let's see here. Add that, and then I'm just picking out, all you have to do is just go through and pick out, this is way too shiny. Looks kind of pretty though, but so, let's see. Play around with how you want the lighting to work on it. And now when you look at it, it has kind of a hard shell texture. It's a low poly box. The whole thing, I believe, is, we are at 476 vertices. We're well under 1,000. And you have a nice little case that you can put whatever you want in the game. So that is pretty much how to make a low poly object, and this can be used, this method with the textures and materials can be done on any object you do in Blender, from high poly to low poly. Anyway, I hope this tutorial, hope you learned something from the tutorial, and let's see. Have a good day.